people who are speaking. So you don't need to take notes of the slides, just listen and enjoy the webinar. Okay, so let me quickly start by introducing our first keynote speaker, which is Ambassador Hospels. André Hospels is the ambassador for the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the United States, based in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Hospels grew up as the son of a flower trader, which has introduced him to international trade at a young age. He studied political science in Amsterdam, specializing in international relations, and he joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1987. Previously, he was, among other things, ambassador to Vietnam and to South Africa, and he became the ambassador to the United States in 2019. André, the floor is yours.
Liske, thank you very much for that introduction, and great to see so many people from both sides of the Atlantic, including many states, as you refer to, as I read in the chat. Great to welcome you all here at this seminar. And I would say that one of the few advantages of this pandemic is that we can have meetings, digital meetings like this, and talk to each other via Zoom or other digital means. Today we are here, of course, to launch the guide that we have developed, the Adaptation for All guide. We've done that in collaboration between the Embassy, between the American Flood Coalition, and between the Dutch enterprise, the firm Arcadis. And I think it's a great example of a collaboration between the government, a private sector, and a non-profit organization. Let me thank all of them for contributing to this guide, and I'm also proud that we, as the Dutch government, were able to finance this guide. It's great to support very concrete these kind of initiatives. And the initiative is, of course, focused on strengthening resilience of communities. And the question that is then always crucial: how do we strengthen resilience in communities? And if you look at this guide, you'll see a number of examples of solutions on how communities can deal with strengthening resilience. For example, if your community has a problem with managing the stormwater, whether it's summer deluge or spring showers, well, this guide offers some concrete examples of how communities can solve this challenge. And another example is that if your community is one of the communities in your region that needs to work together to solve a problem, whether it's riverine flooding or whether it's sea level rise, it shows concrete what communities can do to work together. And I think that refers also to the Dutch model, what we call the polder model. And the idea of the polder model, which we have kept for more than 800 years, is that you try to keep your feet dry and learn actually new ways to live with the water. And our farmers first used it. And instead of one farmer reshaping the landscape that he's working on to protect only his farm, what he does, often then at the expense of his neighbor, what he did and what he does now is work together with his neighbor, join forces, and try to figure out how you can both save the farms and the environment. So that's what this guide can help to do for communities from every size, whether small or large. And I see this guide in that respect as a starting point. And I hope that during the webinar today, we will learn more about real life examples of building flood resilience. Now, I understand that the mayor of Nags Head in North Carolina is here today in one of the breakout sessions. He will share his experience. Mayor, I'm still looking forward to visit the Outer Banks. Since the corona, traveling has not been easy, but I'm sure I'll put it high on my list once traveling is more easy again in the United States. And then in another breakout session, we'll have our Dutch colleagues from Rijkswaterstaat. They will share their experience with the concept Room for the River. A quite interesting concept, and I'm sure that will fit nicely into today's program. We also have with us today Camille Crane, who is representing the Federal Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, better known in many circles as the BRIC program. And of course, funding is an important issue for many communities. So we're happy to have her with us to answer any questions that you might have about the BRIC program, which is run by the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And at the end of the webinar, and I must say that is always a challenge because we have many experts around the table, but it would be great if at the end of the webinar we will be able to determine what next steps could be taken collectively, what next steps we might take to work on adaptation for all. And I'm sure that the guide, again, that is presented today can play a big role in that. So Lieske, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and I wish all participants a very successful seminar, and I'm happy to give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, André. Thank you for explaining the polder model to all of us, and also for giving us a preview in the webinar. I'm quickly going to our next keynote speaker, which is Melissa Roberts. Ms. Roberts is the founder and executive director of the American Flood Coalition. The American Flood Coalition is a nonpartisan group of more than 250 cities, elected officials, military leaders, businesses, and civic groups. It brings together leaders from both sides of the aisle to work on adaptation and help support and protect flood-affected communities. Prior to her current role, Ms. Roberts was, among other things, Director of Strategy at First Street Foundation and Engagement Manager at McKinsey & Company. Ms. Roberts studied history at the University of Pennsylvania. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lieske. It's a pleasure to be here and get to share the guide and to welcome you all today. So to provide a little bit of an intro to AFC, the American Flood Coalition was founded 3 years ago with the goal to advance solutions to flooding and sea level rise for communities of all sizes across the country. And our members are on the front lines of flooding and are grappling every day with questions around how to find feasible and realistic solutions to build resilience in our communities. And we hope that this guide serves as a valuable resource to do that, not only for our coalition members, but for any community looking to try to build local flood resilience. And it only feels right, as we're finally here getting to launch the guide, to spend a moment talking about how the idea for this guide began. So as AFC funded and got to work alongside our Dutch partners on the 2019 Dutch Dialogues in Charleston, South Carolina, we saw the enormous potential of bringing together the best of Dutch and American concepts, but we also saw the limitations of being able to only work in one city at a time when so many communities were asking for help, especially smaller communities with limited budgets. And so we wanted to bring the very best of what we were seeing in the Dutch dialogues, a focus on innovating, listening to community members, and seeing a spectrum of solutions to all communities struggling with these challenges. And that was really the impetus for our collaboration on this guide. And at AFC, we're always looking for ways to make adaptation and resilience more accessible to our coalition members and to all communities. And this guide was an important way for us to do that. So we invested deeply over the last year to make this guide a reality because we knew it was filling an important void in making adaptation more accessible. And you might wonder why. What was this void? There's a lot of tools that already exist. There's a lot of projects in the headlines. But for us, we really have come to realize that in addition to projects and solutions underway in large and mid-sized cities, we know also that smaller communities have resilience needs that are just as important and often more challenging to meet with smaller staffs and budget constraints. And in fact, the only way our country will truly be resilient is if we can find, scale, and finance solutions that protect small, rural, and poor communities with the same attention we give to big, well-resourced cities. And this is something we know really well at American Flood Coalition because over 2/3 of the municipalities in our coalition's membership have populations of 50,000 or less. And much of the country's population lives in communities of a similar size. And to just offer a really concrete example of why adaptation for all matters so much, when we think about a storm like Hurricane Sally hitting the Gulf Coast, it impacted more than 100 different jurisdictions across 2 states. And the resilience to that storm is defined by all of those jurisdictions. It takes just one jurisdiction where critical infrastructure fails or people can't move out of harm's way to create a devastating toll. So we've kept this in mind as we thought about how to put together a set of solutions that makes adaptation accessible for all communities, providing examples from communities large and small, and breaking out approaches by cost and complexity so local leaders can assess what's needed to implement these solutions within the context of their budget and capacity. And we also highlighted case studies from across the US, but with a focus on hurricane impacted regions in the Southeast, where much of our membership is located, to really be able to provide concrete examples of local resilience approaches, which is what you'll find in the guide, and we'll talk about more. And now, more than ever, with many communities facing higher seas, stronger storms, and more frequent flooding, communities of all sizes are in need of new tools and strategies to prepare for flooding and sea level rise. So we're so proud to have worked in partnership with the Dutch Embassy and Arcadis to produce this guide, and most importantly, to be able to celebrate success stories and examples from the United States and the Netherlands. So I'm so glad that you're all here with us today, and I hope no matter what type of community you represent or where it's located, there's something here that can serve as a jumping off point and help accelerate your work on resilience, which is so vital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And thank you for sharing what the American Flood Coalition stands for and why we developed the guides. Let me quickly go to our next speaker, which is my colleague, Sasuke Perdans. Ms. Perdans is Senior Advisor on Infrastructure and Water Management at the Netherlands Embassy. She focuses primarily on water management and climate adaptation. Previously, Ms. Perdans was Chief Representative for the Netherlands Business Support Office in Houston, Texas, promoting business opportunities between the Netherlands and Texas. Ms. Perdans has a background in sales, marketing, communication, and international relations. Saskia, go ahead.
Thank you, Liska. I'm going to share the screen. One moment, please. Okay, good morning, America, and good afternoon, everyone in the Netherlands and people from all over the world, what I learned. My name is Sasuke Perdans. Water became a very important part in my life since we've been living in Houston. We've experienced Hurricane Harvey, some major floodings, and during Tropical Storm Imelda, I got flooded with my car. And recently, we also experienced another wave of water. No water for days during the Arctic cold in Texas. I'm going to trying to get to the next. Okay, sorry. During this presentation, I'm going to tell you something about the Netherlands, the partnerships with the United States, and I'm very proud, as all our partners, to introduce the guide Adaptation for All, How to Build Flood Resilience for Communities of Every Size. But first, I want to start with some background information about the Netherlands. We have 17 million residents, and 26% of the Netherlands is below sea level. Without coastal flood protection, 60% of the Netherlands would be prone to flooding. And half of our GDP is earned at or below sea level. The Netherlands is a third bigger than the size of Maryland. And we have learned to live with water and harness its power. In the last 800 years, the Dutch have created innovative solutions to water-related problems that threaten communities, economic capital, and the quality of life. The Dutch believe the work is never done. The Netherlands need to keep preparing to be safe from water problems, not just now, but also in the next century. Good water management and integrated planning is essential for the existence of our country. In the past 15 years, we've been sharing centuries worth of experience with our US partners in various ways. Since Hurricane Katrina, Dutch practitioners and leaders, such as engineers, policy experts, and architects, have been collaborating with their American counterparts to make US communities more resilient. But Katrina was also a wake-up call for the Netherlands. We learned a lot about emergency management. This collaboration played an important role in the development of new coastal and river-run defense structures in New Orleans and in a coastal master plan in Louisiana. And it also led to the Rebuild by Design competition in the New York area after Superstorm Sandy. And the collaboration led to resilient strategies in communities such as Norfolk and Charleston. While national news often highlights the projects and solutions on the way in large cities like New York, Boston, or Miami, we know that smaller communities have similar needs to build resilience to flooding and sea level rise. Since we have had also record-breaking hurricane seasons, all the numbers have been named last year, and spring floodings in the last years, communities of all sizes are in need of new tools and strategies to prepare for future flooding and sea level rise. That's why we partnered with the American Flood Coalition and Arcadis to design guide Adaptation for All, how to build flood resilience for communities of every size. The guide helps answer the critically important questions where to start building resilience. This guide covers 26 approaches to addressing flooding and sea level rise from communities both large and small, and both from the US and the Netherlands. And as Melissa already mentioned, we have been breaking out approaches by cost and complexity so that local leaders can assess what's needed to implement these approaches. And there are learnings that any city can take from the examples outlined in this guide. And we hope that they serve as a jumping off point for local leaders looking to build a resilient future for their community. And by using simple rather than technical language, this guide is designed as a resource that local leaders can use and share broadly during community-based processes. How to use this guide? The guide starts with key tips and ideas for developing a local flood action plan. And then you can review the approaches section for 26 summaries and case studies of the following approaches: land use and policy, stormwater and drainage, coastal and shoreline. And next, use the cost and complexity diagram to explore which approaches may best fit for your flood challenges, resources, and budget. And share the guide with your stakeholders to build community engagement. These approaches are described based on the following characteristics: scale, from system, building, to municipal or to state. All the ranges are there. Investment types, public, private, or maybe a combination of that. And also operations and maintenance from high, minimum, or low efforts. Federal funds, incentives, or technical assistance are also included. And additional information resources are there, so you can read some more if necessary. By combining the shared experience of Dutch and American resilience experts into practical approaches for smaller communities, we hope to include more communities in the discussion about turning flood risk into opportunities to shape the future as places to call home. Thank you so much for your time. During the Q&A, you can ask questions, and at the end of the webinar, we'll share the link to the guide. Back to you, Liska.
Thank you very much, Saskia, and thank you for giving us some first insights into the guide. I see I didn't receive any questions yet in the chat, so let me remind everyone you can put your questions in the chat while I go introduce our last speaker, which is Camille Crane. Ms. Crane is Section Chief of the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, also known as BRIC, at the FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Ms. Crane worked for FEMA Region 6 and Region 4, and she was State Hazard Mitigation Officer for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Ms. Crane has over 20 years of experience with FEMA's HMA grant programs. She studied history and public administration at the University of Kentucky, and I'm told she's a proud member of Big Blue Nation. Ms. Crane, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Liska. And thank you so much for the invitation today to come and talk to you about one of the programs that FEMA has, the Federal Emergency Management Agency here in the United States, to help build resilient communities. It's an honor to come and talk to you very shortly and give you a very high overview of our program, perhaps one of those federal resources that Saskia just talked about. So let's get started. So BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, like I said, is FEMA's newest hazard mitigation grant program. It came about through the Disaster Recovery Reform Act of 2018. So after all the hurricanes and wildfires of 2017, legislation was passed in 2018. And part of that legislation was the creation of this program. We spent 18 months from October 2018 to the launch of our program in August of 2020, really thinking about what were the needs in the country. How could we help mitigate the risk to natural hazards and help communities and stakeholders build capacity? We did a large stakeholder engagement that that had over 5,000 individual non-attributable comments and more than 70 agency letters, including from American Flood Coalition. And from all that, we built our program on 6 guiding principles. So going through these, first, we want to support communities' capacity and capability building. We really live with a lot of intention in their program design, in the name of our program, building resilient infrastructure, but also building resilient communities. We want to encourage and enable innovation. We want to promote partnerships. We understand that one grant program on its own cannot fit all the needs of the country, but how can our grant program act as a catalyst to help different entities come together to achieve these outcomes? We wanted to enable large infrastructure projects. So we've increased the cost caps that we are able to fund to do larger infrastructure projects. We wanted to maintain flexibility. We are in our program design have built a program that can continually improve and that will learn from itself year upon year and grow also with the needs of the country. And then we wanted to provide consistency. As I said, we're one of FEMA's hazard mitigation grant programs. There are 3 in total, including us. And so usually these are run at the state level by our state hazard mitigation officers. So where we could be consistent with those other 2 programs, we wanted to do that. And of course, in our program design, we supported FEMA's strategic plan. FEMA's strategic plan has goal 1 to build a culture of preparedness. And goal 1.1 talks about increasing the mitigation investment. And we are a part of that solution. We wanted to ready the nation for catastrophic disasters. And also, of course, in program design, we wanted to make sure as we were designing it, trying not to make it too complex and to reduce the complexity of FEMA. When our 2020 Notice of Funding Opportunity came out, or NOFO, we listed 4 BRIC priorities. First, to encourage public infrastructure mitigation. So that is projects that are infrastructure that not necessarily has to be owned by the public, but benefits the public. We wanted to increase projects that mitigate the risk to 1 or more community lifelines. So the community lifelines construct came about during the hurricane season of 2017. And it looks at the critical services and critical paths in communities along 7 different sectors that really speak to the needs for how to respond and recover faster. So we thought, well, if we can mitigate the risk to those lifelines, then there isn't so much of a need to recover. So those lifelines include communications, transportation, hazardous materials, food, water, and shelter, things like that. We wanted to promote projects that incorporate nature-based solutions. When I talk about our stakeholder engagement of more than 5,000, that was a trend that really came through, was they wanted the program to put an emphasis on nature-based solutions. And then incentivize adoption and enforcement of modern building codes. As you look across the Disaster Recovery Reform Act, DRA, you're going to see building codes mentioned throughout the act. And so we wanted to really make sure that our program also focused on helping communities adopt code that don't have it and enforce or better their code if they do, understanding that building codes are foundational to a community's resiliency. So this is what I lovingly call our pizza tracker. And it gives a high-level overview of where we are in the development of the program. And now, since the program has launched in August 4th of 2020, where we are in this first year of funding. So you'll see our red arrow right now speaks to that we are currently reviewing our first crop of applications we got in with our application deadline of January 29th, 2020. We have a very robust review process that will go throughout June of 2021 and some selections being made in summer of 2021 on this first crop of applications. So the question I always get is, okay, well, who can apply for BRIC? This sounds like a great program. I'd like to get some of this funding. How do I do that? Who can apply? So the applicants, and those are the folks that can apply directly to FEMA, include our 50 states, our 5 US territories, the federally recognized tribes, and the District of Columbia. So those are the entities that can apply, put an application to FEMA for BRIC. Sub-applicants, meaning these are the folks that develop projects and submit them to an applicant who then will submit them to FEMA, include local governments, tribal governments, other state agencies, and tribal agencies. Who you won't see on this list is private citizens, nonprofits, businesses, academia. But we can absolutely do mitigation with those entities or for their property, for example. It just takes partnership. So that's one of the reasons why promoting partnerships is one of the 6 guiding principles of BRIC. So it would be a matter of like if a local homeowner wanted to do mitigation on their property, they would need to partner with an eligible subapplicant like their county, and then that county would apply on their behalf to FEMA, or I'm sorry, to the state who applies to FEMA. So one of the reasons we talk about BRIC really being game-changing and transformational is the way the program is funded. So we replaced the pre-disaster mitigation or PDM program that you may have heard about in the past that was around for 20 years. That was a congressionally appropriated program that got funding every year through congressional appropriations. And that funding would ebb and flow. Some years it was zeroed out. Some years there was only $25 million for the entire nation. At its highest, it was $250 million. What makes BRIC different is we no longer are reliant on congressional appropriations. The way the law wrote it is now every time there is a presidentially declared disaster, 180 days later, a 6% estimate is taken from those estimated disaster costs and put into what I lovingly call the BRIC piggy bank. So inside the disaster relief fund, we have an account, and it gets injections of funding every time a presidentially declared disaster hits 180 days. And presidentially declared disasters don't seem to be stopping or slowing down, so we are constantly getting new funding. What we were able to do, and then what we do is once a year, we will reach into our piggy bank and scoop out funding and put it in that year's annual cycle of funds. So for this first year of BRIC, our application period was from September 30 to January 29, 2021. So it is closed, but for this first year, we were able to scoop out $500 million, which is twice the investment that ever was put into pre-disaster mitigation before. And we divided that out into allocations, tribal set-asides, and a national competition. As we talk about what do we fund, there's 2 main different project types I want to talk about. One is first what we term our capacity and capability building activities. And we have 4 different project types that fall into this bucket. That includes building codes. I talked about how strong emphasis the program puts on building codes. We're putting our money there. We want to help communities enact code, better their code, and enforce code. Partnerships, another one we talk about that is one of our guiding principles. We also, for the first time, are offering funding to help communities build partnerships. And that was something we heard through the stakeholder engagement. You know, how do I get a partner? Well, let's help you with funding to do that. Project scoping is the idea that you know you need to do something, but you're not quite sure what that something is. So this is funding that's given upfront as seed money to design a project, to do the engineering, the benefit cost analysis, the cost estimates, put the application together to then potentially put into future cycles of funding. And then mitigation planning. We've had mitigation planning since the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, and we are supportive of mitigation planning and the incorporation of mitigation plans and the integration of mitigation plans. Then there are the actual projects that we fund as well. So a lot of people would ask me, well, Camille, you know, do you still fund what you used to fund? And the answer is yes. You'll see a copy of our guidance on the screen on your left. That's the hazard mitigation guidance last updated in 2015. It has a checklist in it that has a list of project types. We still fund all of those. In addition, we fund new things as well. I've talked a little bit about some of the project scoping and building codes, but we also have through the DRA additional wildfire and wind and earthquake early warning. As we stress the importance of innovation, what I want to tell people is just mostly pay attention to what is in the blue box to the right. At the end of the day, our projects must be cost effective, eliminate the risk and damages from future natural hazards, be built to one of the latest 2 consensus codes for whatever that project type is, align with the hazard mitigation plans at the sub-applicant and applicant level, and meet all environmental and historic preservation requirements. Another piece of the program I really want to talk about quickly is something I'm super excited about, and that is the piece of the program that is non-financial. We know for a lot of our communities, the bar to put forward an application, they're just not there yet. They definitely need help, but they need more hands-on technical assistance than grant funding. So we built something in our program called non-financial direct technical assistance. And for this first year, 2020, we're going to be able to select up to 10 communities, 1 in each FEMA region, that we will go, whatever that might look like, and help them with a certain need. We left the aperture open. It just had to be the realm of natural hazards resiliency. And it was basically, they had to write a letter and submit it into an email box that described their needs and their commitment to partner with us through the process. And this is something we hope to continue in the program and build upon from year to year, and eventually be able to build a peer network of communities that receive this technical assistance. I want to leave you with a list of resources. So on our BRIC website, we have created what we call program support material. They're easy to read, 4 to 7 pages, that really outline some of the different components of our program that are different or new from what we've done before, including the building code and partnerships activities. Our competition is based on a 200-point system. So we wanted to be very transparent. So we have program support material out there for what we call our BRIC technical criteria and our BRIC qualitative criteria. We also have an information sheet out there about the non-financial direct technical assistance. So this, I know you're going to get a recording of this. You're going to see a lot of different links here that are really supporting the BRIC program. And then of course, I'll end you with our BRIC website, which is easy enough, hopefully, to remember at fema.gov/BRIC. So Liska, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Camille, but I'm going to turn right back to you because we do have some questions about BRIC. Here's one by Julie Reichert. She asks, does the BRIC funding include natural infrastructure projects such as living shorelines to mitigate flooding?
Yes, it does. In short answer. And one of the things I will also promote is we have something called our Mitigation Action Portfolio, which is available on our BRIC website. It is a collection of 42 case studies that is multi-hazard, goes across the country, has projects from small to large. And that was something that we created as responsive to stakeholder feedback that really highlights different project types that we feel are representative of the BRIC program. And you'll see project types like that in it.
Okay, great. And another one regarding BRIC. This is from Charlene Milliken. Does the proposed project have to be in a community's hazard mitigation plan, or can it be a new project that aligns with their hazard mitigation plan?
So aligns. You don't have to have verbatim, you know, like 123 Main Street listed in the hazard mitigation plan, but it needs to align, meaning that if it's a flood project, the plan identifies flooding as a risk and does a risk assessment on it. And then it talks about what is the community's mitigation strategies. So it may talk about that it is different drainage projects, for example. But so it has to align both with 2 plans, basically, both the local plan, which is at the sub-applicant level, and the applicant plan, typically a state. Tribes also have plans.
Okay, I also have one more question of my own, if that's okay, because you were explaining that you are now going through the review phase, first application round, and I'm curious what the aspects are you are looking at to judge the applications.
Absolutely. I talked about that we have a robust review process, and it actually contains 4 different elements. We started in February with what we call eligibility and completeness. That's done by our FEMA regions. And that is where they spent 3 weeks going through all the applications, just determining basic eligibility. So was the sub-applicant eligible? Did they have a hazard mitigation plan? Was the benefit cost analysis attached if necessary? And is the project type eligible? once we get past that, we then started scoring our applications through our 200-point competition scoring. We scored our first 100 points on what we call technical criteria. And these are 8 different priorities of the program, such as you could get points if it was infrastructure, if it had mitigated the risk of community lifelines, if it included nature-based solutions. We looked at what the applicant's building codes were, what the sub-applicant's BSEGs or building code effectiveness grading schedule score is. We had points for if the community was small and impoverished to help kind of level the playing field. But we scored that first 100 points. Then we took the top billion applications and we're moving them right now into what we call our qualitative panels. So we are in our first of 4 weeks where we are doing peer review panels. So as of 30 minutes ago, I have 100 people across the country on a Zoom that are reviewing applications, and they're reviewing them across 6 other criteria worth another 100 points. And this goes into how does the applications look at risk reduction and resiliency effectiveness? Do they consider future conditions? Do they have good implementation measures? How did they leverage partners, and how did they do outreach? And then what are their populations impacted, and have they recognized vulnerable populations to help create equity in their project? So once we get past that, at the same time, I have a tranche of engineers that are doing what we call technical feasibility and cost effectiveness review. So that's going on at the same time, where once the projects have been determined basically eligible, we now have them being reviewed for technical feasibility and cost effectiveness. That actually process will run through about May. And then we will start going, okay, now we have the answers across all these applications. Let's see how they stack with the 200 points, making sure all the eligibility has been met, and then starting going through that approval process to get the announcements out for which ones have been selected and are going to be sent back to our FEMA regions for pre-award processes in summer, late summer.
It sounds like quite a process. Good luck with that. I also have one question I would like to ask Saskia, also from the chat, from Herman Diaz. He asked, do the guidelines include potential options to address water quality issues resulting from stormwater discharges?
Well, thanks for asking, Hermes. Yes, there are many projects in the guides that address flooding and water quality objects. So wait till the end of the webinar and download the guide and you can read all about it. Thank you.
That was a very quick answer, very good. I also saw a question about involving communities and the acceptance of communities, but I do know that the breakout sessions will also get into that. So my suggestion would be to end this plenary part and go into the breakout sessions, so you'll have enough time to discuss the actual projects, and then we'll get back to the plenary session after that. So let me explain the breakout sessions to you, and thank you very much, Camille and Saskia. We have 2 breakout sessions. When you registered for this webinar, you also selected a breakout session, and you will automatically be sent to the breakout session that you selected. Both sessions actually have the same setup, but they only have different examples and different speakers. The first breakout session covers 2 examples of watershed and stormwater approaches: Overdiepse Polder and Room for the River from the Netherlands, and Good Neighbors Stormwater Park in North Miami, Florida. And the moderators of that session are Edgar Westerhoff and Travis Johnson of Arcadis, and they will introduce themselves and the speakers in the breakout sessions. The speakers are on the sheet. And the second breakout session covers 2 examples of coastal approaches: groundwater lowering in the town of Nags Head, North Carolina, and coastal protection in Scheveningen, the Netherlands. The moderators of this session are Anne Baker and Annabelle Cryan of the American Flood Coalition, and they will introduce themselves and the speakers you see on the slide in the breakout session. So I suggest our technical staff, please open the breakout sessions. Thank you. And welcome back. Here we are again. I hope you enjoyed the breakout sessions. The session I was in was not quite finished yet with the discussion. I'm assuming maybe the other one wasn't as well. But I do think we had some nice examples and some good debates, and I'm sure we can get in contact later on to ask some more questions. I have a question for you now, because now that you have an idea of the types of projects that are in the guide, we are interested to learn from you what you think our next steps should be. How should we proceed from here? What do you think the next steps are that we should take? You can write your answer in the Mentimeter, the code's on the screen. And take your time. Well, I will introduce the final speaker of today, but the code will still remain in the screen. And our final speaker for the closing remarks is Mr. Piet Dirke. Mr. Dirke is the global leader for resilience and water management at Arcadis. He has 35 years of working experience on 5 continents in water management, urban resilience, flood protection, waterfront development, and climate adaptation. Prior to working for Arcadis, Mr. Dirke was, among other things, professor in urban water management at the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences, and he worked on assignments in Asia, in Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Bangladesh, to name but a few. We've asked Mr. Dirke to give us some closing remarks for the webinar. Piet, please take it away.
I can't get to the big screen. Can somebody help me? Sorry, I have a problem with the screen. It is very small. Okay.
For us, you're on the big screen, Piet.
Okay.
Only we don't see you.
I'm trying now, yeah. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that. I had. Okay, just some closing remarks. I think there's a lot has been said. It's very hard to summarize that all, but just let me try.
Could you turn your camera on, because we cannot see you?
Oh. Yeah, maybe you can see me now.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry for that. Okay, closing remarks. Just a few keywords to remind us of what many speakers have been talking about, and I think that's more a bit of a red thread in the discussion. First of all, we talked about US-Dutch collaboration here. It's very valuable. I've been with this now for 15 years. We recently had a kind of a reunion session with Louisiana, discussing how it all started with the Dutch dialogues with David Wagoner and Dale Morris and others in Louisiana, and have been collaborating ever since. But this collaboration, of course, also brings very valuable results for other communities across the globe, and I think also for communities of all sizes. So that's really an attractive thing. There was a lot of talking about costing. How do we get the money for funding? We got some great inspirational examples how to get money, federal or from other sources, private sources. But let's not forget, when we talk about the costs and the funding, that first and for all, it's about the benefits of resilience. And those benefits go far beyond only flood protection or avoidance of damage. They also bring us many benefits for the ecosystem, social benefits, health and safety benefits. So there's a lot of benefits that we can count in when we deal with climate resilience. So it is really, really worth your money. Every investment in climate resilience is good for your community, and you will have definitely a good return on investment on that. If you count, particularly if you count all those other benefits that were mentioned, for instance, when it comes to tourism or quality of life and all those other aspects. I think we learned a lot about how important it is to have everybody involved, landowners involvement when it comes to Room for the River, community involvement. It's all about active involvement, but also about creative involvement. We saw examples of how you can use creative solutions, even have artists involved in drawing people's attention or to educate people. We also saw that multifunctional solutions like the ones in the Netherlands, but also others, bring additional benefits if they serve the community with those benefits and be even more attractive making better use even of that precious space in our urban communities. And we also saw that every solution requires multiple parties, public and private, governmental, NGOs, different skills. And that means also that we need to think about best ways of collaboration, how to align all those parties, how to build partnerships, also pay attention to leadership in communities. That is very relevant for success. We learned that nature-based solutions are the best. Nature-based solutions are more resilient, are more sustainable, and they are adaptable. With rising sea levels, we can adapt them as well. And of course, we talked about inclusion and equitable community resilience. In the end, this is for the community. It doesn't make any sense that we only bring infrastructural solutions to the communities if we don't include everybody in those solutions as well. And I think today was a great example of learning experience. We need to continue to learn. We don't have the answers yet to everything, but we can learn by doing. We can learn from our best practices. We need to prepare next steps as we already started this session. So it would be interesting to see where we take this report and the information that we shared today to a next level, maybe to other conferences or to other places to share. And let's summarize my own summary in maybe 3 very short statements. Let's build with nature. Let's give room to our rivers. And let's all, as we learned from the Dutch dialogues, let's learn to live with water. And that's it from me. Thank you. And back to you.
Thank you very much, Pete. That's a great summary of a great webinar. So now I'm curious to hear what you think our next step should be. Maybe we could see the slide if people have commented on what the next step should be. Is that possible or is that not possible? There it is. Oh, okay. I'm going to need some time to look at that, but time seems to be running out. So I'm going to the last part of this webinar. And it's time for me to thank all the speakers, the moderators, the technical staff, and everyone else who helped make this webinar possible. And of course, all of you, the participants, thank you for joining us today. And as a small token of our appreciation, I now have the privilege to present to you the link where you can download the guide, Adaptation for All. So here it is. Da, 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 da. Oh. The link will be posted in the chat and it will also be sent to you next week, together with the recording of the webinar, the presentations, and any questions that may not have been answered during the webinar. So thank you very much again, and I hope you will enjoy reading our guide, Adaptation for All. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.